I'm Jerry Fort. Welcome to Jungle Jerry's Treehouse. So this is Magic Treehouse number 25. It's called Stage Fright on a Summer Night by Mary Pope Osborne. So it looks like that's William Shakespeare, maybe? I think I tried to guess that when I showed you after the last story. All right, so let's get into this thing. See what this is all about. Chapter 1, Special Magic. Jack and Annie sat on their porch. Lightning bugs blinked in the warm summer twilight. "Wow, a shooting star," said Annie, pointing at the sky. Jack looked up, just in time to see a streak of light flash through the sky. The light hovered above the Frog Creek woods. Then it disappeared into the treetops. Jack caught his breath. He turned to Annie. "That was no shooting star," he said. "Right," she said. "They jumped up." Jack grabbed his backpack from inside the front hall. "Dad, Mom, can we go out?" he called. "We'll be back soon." 10 minutes, no more," their mom said. "Okay," said Jack. He closed the door. "Let's go, hurry." He and Annie ran across their yard. They ran down their street. They ran into the woods. They ran until they came to the tallest oak. They looked up. "Yep," said Annie. Jack just smiled. He was too happy for words. "That's our shooting star," said Annie. "The magic treehouse." She grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. When they climbed inside the treehouse, they both gasped. A beautiful woman with long white hair stood in the shadowy corner. "Hello, Jack and Annie," said Morgan Le Fay. "Morgan!" Jack and Annie cried. They threw their arms around her. "Why are you here?" said Annie. "What do you want us to do for you?" You have already done many good things for me," said Morgan, and for King Arthur in Camelot. "Now I want you to do something good for yourselves. You are going to learn magic." "Oh, wow," said Annie. "Are we going to become magicians? Will you teach us charms and spells?" Morgan laughed. There is magic that does not need charms or spells," she said. "You'll find a special magic on each of your next adventures." "How?" asked Jack. "A secret rhyme will guide you on each journey," Morgan said. "Here is the first." She held up a slip of paper. Annie took the paper from Morgan and read the rhyme aloud. "To find a special magic, you must step into the light, and without wand, spell, or charm, turn dynamite into night." Turn daytime into night? Did I say dynamite? I did say dynamite. Did I say dynamite? I did. Let me read it again. "To find a special magic, you must step into the light, and without wand, spell, or charm, turn daytime into night." That's what it says, dynamite. "Turn daytime into night?" said Jack. "How can we do that?" Morgan smiled. "Why is my nose itchy?" "That's what you have to find out," she said. Jack had lots of questions, but before he could ask any of them, a flash lit up the treehouse. He closed his eyes against the light. When he opened them, Morgan Le Fay was gone. On the floor where she had stood was a book. "Morgan didn't tell us enough," said Jack. "But she left this research book," said Annie. She picked up the book, "and it'll tell us the first place to go." She held the book up to the gray light at the window. The cover showed a busy river with boats and a bridge. The title was "Merry Old England." "What's old mean?" asked Annie. "I think that's the old way of spelling old," said Jack. "You say it the same." I guess she spelled it. What does OLDE mean? Yeah. So we're going to merry old England to find magic, said Annie. That sounds fun. Ready? I guess, said Jack. He still wished they'd gotten more information from Morgan, but he pointed at the cover of their research book. He says, I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. The wind blew harder and harder. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. London Bridge. Are they falling down? Nah. Warm daylight flooded into the treehouse. Jack opened his eyes. Annie was wearing a long dress with an apron. Jack was wearing a shirt with puffy sleeves, knee-length pants, and tights. Their shoes were leather slippers. Jack's backpack was now a leather bag. These clothes are weird, said Jack. His voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of thundering wagon. Oh, gosh. I'm going to start this already. His voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of thundering wagon wheels coming from below. What's going on? Said Annie. She and Jack looked out. The treehouse had landed in a patch of trees near a wide brown river. Wagons, carts, and people were heading toward the river. Ferry boats, sailing ships, and white swans glided across the water. Wow, it's so busy, said Annie. Jack opened the research book and read, in 1600, over 100,000 people lived in London, England. At that time, England was ruled by Queen Elizabeth I. She was much loved by her people. A queen? Cool, said Annie. Jack took out his notebook and wrote, London 1600, Queen Elizabeth I. I've never seen a bridge like that, said Annie, looking to the left. Jack looked with her. A giant stone bridge crossed the river. The bridge looked like a small town. It was crowded with houses, shops, and even a church. Jack found a picture of the bridge in the research book. He read aloud. At the heart of London was London Bridge. The bridge crossed the Thames River. At different times in history, the bridge fell down, but it was always built again. Is that where London Bridge is falling down comes from, the song? I wonder. Oh, wow, said Annie. That must be where the song comes from. She sang, London Bridge is falling down, falling down. While Annie sang, Jack took out his notebook and wrote, London Bridge crosses Thames River, crowded with stores and houses. Let's go look for the magic, said Annie. She read Morgan's note again. To find a special magic, you must step into the light, and without wand, spell, or charm, turn daytime into night. Jack squinted up at the sky. It was very blue without even a cloud. It's just not possible, he said, shaking his head. But he threw the research book and his notebook into his leather bag. Then he followed Annie down the rope ladder. When they reached the ground, they started walking toward the river. P.U., Annie said, holding her nose. The river smelled terrible. No one else seemed to mind the smell, though. People were cheerfully piling into ferry boats or heading for the bridge. They all seemed happy, as if they were going someplace fun. A group of ragged boys brushed past Jack and Annie. They were about 12 or 13 years old. They were laughing and out of breath. Hurry, we'll be late, one shouted. The boys ran toward the stone gateway leading onto the bridge. Late for what? Said Annie. What's on the other side of that bridge? Why are they in such a hurry to get there? I don't know, said Jack. He pulled out the research book. I'll see what the book says. "No, let's just go, or we'll be late," said Annie. She took off running. "Okay, okay," said Jack. He put away the book and ran after her toward London Bridge. Chapter 3. The Bear Garden. Jack and Annie passed under the stone gateway that led onto London Bridge. As they started across, Jack was amazed. The bridge was so noisy and smelly. Wagon wheels rumbled like thunder over the cobblestones. Pots clinked in carts. Horses neighed. Shopkeepers shouted, "Good pies, hot peas, new pins." New pins? Sounds kind of odd, doesn't it? Shoes, soap, salt. A shoekeeper caught Jack's eye. "What lack you, boy?" he shouted. "Nothing, thank you," said Jack, and kept walking. "Watch out!" a cart driver yelled. Jack grabbed Annie's hand. He pulled her out of the way. The cart rolled past them over the narrow roadway. "Look," said Annie. She pointed to a bear in a wooden cage in the back of the cart. The bear had matted brown fur. His head was down. As the cart rumbled on, Jack shook his head. "What next?" he said. "Them," said Annie, looking up. She pointed at huge blackbirds sitting hunched at the edges of the rooftops. The birds sat still as they stared down at all the carts and animals and people crossing London Bridge. Jack shivered and moved quickly past the gaze of the giant silent birds. Finally, he and Annie came to the end of the bridge. Oh, gosh. They stepped onto the riverbank. There, they stopped and looked around. "I wonder where those big kids went," said Annie. Jack studied the crowd heading down the road that led from the bridge. There was no sign of the group of ragged boys. Jack took out their research book. He found the picture of London Bridge. He read aloud. London Bridge connected London to the south bank of the river, an area where Londoners went for entertainment. The Bear Garden was a popular spot. "The Bear Garden," said Annie. "That sounds good. Where's that?" Jack found a map of the south bank. He pointed to a circle that was labeled Bear Garden. "Here," he said. He looked up, and there, he pointed to the dark round building in the distance. "Great," said Annie. "I want to see the garden filled with bears." Let's read," started Jack. "Let's look," said Annie. She headed toward the Bear Garden. Jack put away their book and followed her. As they got closer, they heard loud shouting and laughter coming from inside the round building. Annie stopped. "Wait," she said. "I'm getting a bad feeling about the Bear Garden. Maybe we should read more about it." Jack opened their book again. He read aloud. At an arena called the Bear Garden, people watched bears fight with dogs. Animal fights were a common sport in Old England. They are against the law today. "Bears fight with dogs? Yuck," said Annie. "I couldn't stand to watch that." "Me neither," said Jack. "Forget that place." He started to walk away. "Hey, Jack, look over there," said Annie. She pointed to a cart nearby. "That's the bear that passed us on the bridge." Chapter 4. A Midsummer Night's Dream. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Annie and Jack ran over to the cart. In the back of it was a cage. In the cage was a big brown bear. The bear was slumped over, his head still down. The sign on the cart said, "Dan the Dancing Bear." "Dan?" Annie asked. Are you going to fight?" The lonely-looking bear raised his huge head and looked at Annie. His dark eyes were sad. He let out a low moan. "I understand," Annie said. "You don't want to fight. You're asking me to take you away." Annie reached for the door of the bear's cage. "Away with you!" someone shouted angrily. "That's my bear." Jack and Annie whirled around. The cart driver was charging toward them. "Please let me out." He's mine. I'm selling him, the man shouted. Come on, Annie, let's go, said Jack. He pulled her into the crowd walking down the road. But I have to save Dan, said Annie, looking over her shoulder. That guy wants us to sell him to the bear fights. I know, said Jack, but we can't just steal him. That guy is his owner. Jack looked around. He needed to get Annie's mind off the bear. He saw the group of older kids from the bridge. They were walking toward a round white building. Hey, look, the kids from the bridge, he said. Let's see where they're going. What about Dan? Said Annie. We can figure that out later, said Jack. Let's follow those kids now. He steered Annie toward the white building, and when they got closer, Jack read the sign out front. A play at the Globe Theater, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Great, thought Jack. Annie loved plays. She loved acting in them at school. A man stood at the door of the theater. He was holding a box. A penny to stand, he shouted. The older kids dropped coins into the box and went inside. Wow, the play costs only a penny, said Jack. That's cheap. But we don't have any pennies, said Annie. Besides, I want to go back and free the bear. Jack sighed. What will you do with him if you free him, Annie? He asked. I'll figure out something. Actually, she says, I'll figure something out, she said. We'll figure it out when the owner's not standing there, Jack said. Right now, let's learn something about this play. He quickly pulled out the research book. He found a picture of the Globe Theater. He wanted Annie to forget about the bear, so he read with lots of feeling. The first theaters were built in old England because there was no electricity. Plays were performed during the day when it was light. Almost everyone could afford to go. Neat, huh? Said Jack. Annie sighed. Jack kept reading it aloud, dramatic voice. Seating for the audience depended on how much was paid. The people who could afford the higher prices sat in galleries above the stage. Others stood in an area below the... Boy! Someone shouted. Jack looked up. A man hurried over to Jack and Annie. He was long-legged with a trim beard and twinkly eyes. I could hear you from across the way, the man said. You read very well. Jack smiled shyly. No, you are simply brilliant, the man said, and I am in great need of a boy who is a brilliant reader. Chapter 5. Stage Fright. Why do you need a boy who's a brilliant reader? Annie asked the man. Because I have just lost 2 fairies, he said. He pointed at Jack. You can read both, and you are nuts, thought Jack. Well, bye. See you around, he said. He nudged Annie to move along. Wait, she said. She turned to the man. What do you mean my brother can read both fairies? Read them where? 2 boy actors didn't show up today to play fairies, said the man. But your brother reads with expression. He can save us all. Jack stared. Was this guy saying what he thought he was saying? Was this guy saying what he thought he was saying? Yeah. You mean you want Jack to be in your play? Said Annie. Indeed, said the man. There are 3,000 people here today waiting to see the play I've written. We cannot disappoint them, can we? 3,000, said Jack. Yes, said the man, and one of them is the most important person in the world. No way, I can't do that, said Jack. He had never liked being on stage. He always got stage fright. Wait, Jack, said Annie. She turned to the man. You need 2 fairies, right? Yes, said the man. Well, Annie tilted her head. Her voice went up. I can read too. Yes, Annie do it. Wait. Yes, let Annie do it, said Jack. She's a great reader. She can be both fairies. Ah, but of course Annie cannot go on stage, the man said kindly. Why not? Asked Annie. The man raised his eyebrows. Surely you know it's against the law for girls to go on stage, he said. Boys must play all the girls. That's the way it was back in them days. But that's not fair, said Annie. Indeed 'tis not. But we cannot change the law now, said the man. He turned to Jack. So, Jack, Will you join our players?" "No, thanks," said Jack. He tried to walk off, but Annie grabbed his arm. "Wait, I think I know what Jack wants," she said to the man. "He will only be in your play if I can be in it too." "No, that's not what I want, Annie," Jack said under his breath. "But, Jack, it would be so much fun," she whispered, "and there's nothing to be afraid of. You get to read your part. You don't have to memorize it." Jack could tell that Annie really wanted to be in the play, and it was definitely a way to keep her mind off the bear. Okay," he said, sighing. He looked at the man. "I'll be in your play if Annie can be in it too." The man looked at Annie. She smiled eagerly at him. The man smiled back. "Why not?" he said. "But Annie will have to pretend to be a boy. She can tuck up her hair and we'll call her Andy." Yay, thanks," said Annie with a grin. A trumpet blasted inside the theater. "Hark! The play begins," the man said. He took Jack and Annie by the hand. "My name is Will, by the way," he said. "Come along, Jack and Andy. Be as swift as shadows." Oh, excuse me. What? Bless me? Oh, thank you. Chapter 6. Let's see where we are here. On stage, Will led Jack and Annie through a door into the back of the Globe Theater. Then he led them up a dark stairway. As they headed upstairs, Jack heard laughter coming from the audience. Excuse me. His legs felt like jelly. "This way," said Will. He led Jack and Annie into a crowded, dimly lit room. Actors were rushing about everywhere. Each seemed to be in his own world. One was pulling on a cape. Another was tying a rope around his waist. A third was whispering words to himself. "I'll find your costumes," said Will. As Will dug through a large basket of clothes, Jack and Annie looked around the costume room. It was crammed with fancy gowns, purple and blue capes, gold and silver wigs, stacks of hats and masks. "Cool," whispered Annie. She touched a donkey mask and a lion mask. "These would make good disguises, huh?" Jack was amazed she was acting so calm. Didn't she know they were about to stand in front of 3,000 people? The thought made him break into a sweat. His stomach felt fluttery. "Here," said Will. He handed them green tunics, hats, and slippers. "Put these on. No time to dally. Your parts come up soon." Jack and Annie slipped behind a curtain and changed into their costumes. As they put on their hats, Annie hid her pigtails. When they came out, Will handed them each a small scroll. "Here are your roles," he said. They have only your lines on them, no one else's." Jack unrolled his scroll. He had 2 long speeches to read. "Wait a second," he said. "I thought I just had a few lines. I didn't know I had a ton." "Don't worry," said Will. "Just remember, speak very clearly and with feeling, and above all, act natural." "Act natural?" thought Jack. "How do you act natural when you're about to have a heart attack?" Just then a short, chubby man burst into the costume room. He had curly hair and bright red cheeks. He was dressed all in green, too. "For goodness sakes, Will," he said in a frantic whisper. "What will we do?" "Don't worry. Look who I've found." "They both can read," said Will. He pushed Jack and Annie forward. "Jack and Andy, meet Puck, merry wanderer of the night. He'll take you to the stage." "Good luck." Annie smiled and Jack groaned. "Come, boys," said Puck. "Follow me." Puck led Jack and Annie out of the costume room and into the hallway. Then he guided them to a dark area at the back of the stage. Actors stood silently nearby. waiting to go on. One wore a beautiful white gown, others wore tattered brown rags. Through an arch, Jack saw the roof of the stage. It was blue with stars and a moon. A huge crowd stood directly in front of the stage. More people watched from the galleries above. Every single person in England is out there, Jack thought with horror. How did I let Annie talk me into this? I'll take you on stage first, Puck whispered to Jack. When I say, "How now, spirit? Whither wander you?" Start reading your lines, understand? Jack barely nodded. His mouth felt dry. He tried to swallow, but he couldn't. Puck turned to Annie. "You go on stage with the Fairy Queen," he whispered. He pointed to the actor dressed in the beautiful white gown. "When she tells you to sing her to sleep, you start your song." "What's the tune?" asked Annie. "Just make it up," said Puck. "Now, if they yell rude things, do not stop. Just, if who yells rude things?" Jack broke in. The groundlings get a bit wild," said Puck. "Groundlings," said Jack. "The rowdy folk who don't have seats," said Puck. "They're standing close to the stage. If they throw rotten fruit, don't stop either. Just keep going." That does it, thought Jack. He couldn't go on stage, not with groundlings throwing things, not with 3,000 people watching, not with 1,000,000 lines to read, and not when he was about to throw up. That's what it says. While Puck and Annie watched the show, Jack slipped away. He looked for the exit. Just as he found the stairs, he bumped into Will. "Where are you going?" Will whispered. "I can't stay," said Jack. "I'm sick." Will sucked in his breath. But then he put his hands on Jack's shoulders and spoke calmly. "Close your eyes for a moment, Jack," he said. Jack closed his eyes. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. "There's nothing to fear," Will whispered. "Imagine you are a fairy. You're in the forest on a summer night. See the silver moon overhead? Hear the owls? Hoo, hoo." Will's deep whisper seemed to cast a spell over Jack. He felt calmer. He could picture the silver moon. He could hear the hooting of the owls. "Are you in the forest on a summer night?" asked Will. Jack nodded. "If you believe that, the audience will believe it too," whispered Will. "We're on," whispered Puck. The chubby actor ran to Jack. He grabbed his hand and pulled him along. Before he knew it, Jack was on stage. All right. We'll stop right there. What you think? We're at chapter 7, in the forest in the night. That's what it says. All right. Stopping at chapter 7. Okay, I'm going to be anxious to find out what the world's going to happen. How Jack's going to do on stage and read his lines. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you on the next part 2.